Oh, there's so many yummy vegetarian options out there. You could try like lentil soup, veggie burgers, tofu stir fry. The possibilities are endless. 7,975,000. That was the estimated population of the Taino people on the island of Hispaniola in 1492. Just a few decades later, that number plummeted to 200 people. An entire civilization systematically eradicated. It's a demographic collapse of an almost incomprehensible scale. And the architect of this devastation is a man we gave a national holiday. Welcome back to Learning with Pratik. If you're new here, I try to increase neuroplasticity by exploring a new topic every day. I do all the reading and researching so you don't have to. Today, we're opening a dark but absolutely crucial chapter in this explainer. We're looking past the sanitized folklore to unmask the true historical reality of Christopher Columbus. Section 1. The Discoverer's Dark Myth. For generations, the narrative we were all taught in school was pretty simple, right? In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. We learned about this intrepid explorer, a brave visionary who discovered the New World and brought Western civilization across the Atlantic. But history is rarely that clean. As we peel back the layers of this myth, the reality that emerges isn't about a benevolent discoverer. It's about a ruthless colonial governor, driven by an insatiable thirst for extraction. Section 2. Primary sources expose truth. To really understand his legacy, we can't just rely on later interpretations or modern opinions. We have to look directly at the primary sources from the late 15th and early 16th centuries. We're talking about the sworn testimonies of Columbus's own men, the diaries of his officers, and the official reports from the Spanish crown. These documents aren't rumors, they're first-hand accounts that expose a regime of profound cruelty. Take the writings of Michel de Cuneo, for example. He was an officer who sailed with Columbus on his second voyage. In his own letters, Cuneo proudly recounts a horrific incident. He writes of capturing a very beautiful Carib woman. Columbus, the Lord Admiral, literally gifted her to him as property. Cuneo then details how he took a rope, brutally whipped her, and raped her. And Columbus? He offered absolutely zero discipline. This was the terrifying standard of behavior established right at the top. The atrocities got so severe that even the Spanish crown, the very people who funded Columbus, grew horrified. In the year 1500, they dispatched Francisco de Bobadilla to investigate years of complaints coming out of Hispaniola. He collected 23 sworn testimonies from colonists. What he uncovered was chilling. He documented Columbus and his brothers executing arbitrary, severe mutilations. Punishments included cutting off people's ears and noses, parading women naked through the streets on donkeys, and selling both indigenous people and even Spanish colonists into slavery. Section 3. Systemic enslavement and cruelty. Now, these weren't just isolated incidents of individual violence. What Columbus engineered was a vast systemic machine of enslavement, explicitly designed to generate profit. When he couldn't find the massive mountains of gold he promised the Spanish monarchs, Columbus decided to send back another kind of loot to pay off his financiers: human beings. Columbus was, factually, a prolific transatlantic slave trader. Let's examine the infamous 1495 slave raid. His forces rounded up roughly 1,500 Arawak men, women, and children. From these captives, 500 of the strongest were packed into the dark, suffocating holds of ships bound for Spain. The conditions were so atrocious that around 40% of them died of disease and cold en route. The survivors who remained on the island? They were simply distributed among Columbus's men to be used as enslaved labor. For the Taino people who weren't shipped overseas, their nightmare continued under the brutal gold tribute system. Columbus implemented a forced labor regime. Step 1, every native over 14 had to collect a hawksbill full of gold powder every 3 months. Step 2, those who succeeded received a copper token to wear around their necks. But step 3 is where the true horror lies. If you were found without a token, Columbus's men would amputate your hands, tie them around your neck, and leave you to bleed to death. The quotas were impossible. Faced with this agonizing torture, historians note that thousands of natives committed mass suicide rather than live under his heel. Section 4. The devastation of Hispaniola. When we zoom out from those individual horrors to the macro level, we begin to see the true scale of the devastation. The demographic collapse of Hispaniola was a direct result of this forced labor, starvation, and the introduction of foreign diseases brought by these expeditions. It was the complete dismantling of an ancient society. Historians and demographers, like Sherburne Cook and Woodrow Bora, have conducted meticulous research to estimate the pre-contact populations of these islands. By analyzing mathematical models, early census data, and the island's ecological carrying capacity, they've helped us grasp just how many people were living thriving lives before European arrival. In 1492, the population of Hispaniola was estimated to be just shy of 8 million. By 1496, just 4 years later, it was cut in half to under 4 million. By 1500, it was 500,000. And by 1542, just 50 years after Columbus first landed, a population of nearly 8 million people had been reduced to 200. It is a staggering, apocalyptic drop. Let the sheer magnitude of those numbers sink in. Bartolomé de las Casas, a Spanish priest who arrived in the Americas shortly after Columbus, became a leading advocate for the rights of the natives. He witnessed this extermination firsthand and left behind a haunting observation. "I saw here cruelty on a scale no living being has ever seen. Our work was to exasperate, ravage, kill, mangle, and destroy." He noted that the native populations were rational, generous people who were entirely destroyed by men acting like ravening beasts. Section 5. Why celebrate a tyrant? This brings us to a deeply intellectual and, frankly, unsettling question. If the primary sources are so damning, if his own contemporaries arrested him for tyranny, and if his actions sparked a near-total genocide, why on earth did the United States decide to enshrine him with a national holiday? Well, to understand that, we have to look at the socio-political origins of the holiday. It actually has very little to do with Columbus's actual deeds. In 1891, a mob in New Orleans lynched 11 Italian immigrants. To placate the outrage and extend an olive branch to Italian Americans facing intense discrimination, President Benjamin Harrison issued a proclamation in 1892 to celebrate Columbus. Decades later, following heavy lobbying, FDR proclaimed it a national holiday in 1937. By 1971, it became an officially recognized federal holiday. The holiday was born out of a need for political appeasement and immigrant assimilation. It was never a historical endorsement of the man's atrocities. Section 6. Reconsidering the Columbian legacy. But history isn't static. We're capable of learning, of reading the primary sources, and of updating our understanding. Today, we are seeing a massive shift away from the sanitized myth of the benevolent discoverer toward a much more historically accurate and honest framework. This is exactly why there is a growing, powerful movement toward Indigenous Peoples Day. The first call for this change actually happened way back in 1977 at a UN conference. In 1992, Berkeley, California, became the first U.S. city to eschew Columbus Day altogether. Fast forward to today, and dozens of cities and states, from Alaska to New Mexico, have replaced the holiday. In 2021, the U.S. saw its first president officially commemorate Indigenous Peoples Day. This shift isn't about erasing history, it's about combating the purposeful erasure of Native history. It refocuses our attention on the survival, resilience, and rich cultures of Indigenous peoples. The renowned historian Howard Zinn argued that celebrating Columbus forces us to really re-examine what we mean by concepts like Western civilization and progress. Yes, there were advances in maritime technology and global trade. But as Zinn asks, is progress simply to be measured in the statistics of industrial and technological change without regard to the consequences for human beings? We have to look at the massive human cost of that so-called progress. Which leaves us here. Can human progress truly be measured by technological change if we entirely ignore the human cost? Is it right to maintain a symbol of triumph when that symbol is rooted in the systematic destruction of millions? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks for watching. Tomorrow, we open a different page. Until then, Pratik out.